On the one hand, it seems kind of cool, like total freedom. I'm just going to, I'm in the jungle. There's no government. Nobody's taxing me about anything. I don't have to like fill out my, annual tax forms. You know how annoying that is. I don't have to follow any kind of regulations. I can do whatever I want. Yes, but so can anybody else. And therein lies the problem. Because you can't even imagine the sort of horrors that somebody else might do to you in order to gain a survival advantage for themselves, their family, and their children. You can't even imagine the horrors. And it's because of this that libertarian societies do not exist. Libertarianism is an ahistorical philosophy. There has not been a single libertarian government that has survived. I mean, maybe they existed, but if they did, they didn't last very long, and you won't find much evidence of it in the history books. They don't exist because they can't exist, because nobody wants to live in that kind of society. In a sense, libertarianism was our starting point as a civilization. If you rewind the clock 100,000 years, before there were cities, maybe even before there were proper towns and even villages, where it was really, really simple, just like, caveman days. Small tribes. That's probably the closest thing you'll get to libertarianism, but there was clan warfare, tribal warfare. It wasn't all sweet and idyllic. It was bloody. One tribe would fight another tribe. If you've read any anthropological or historical documentation about how tribes live, actually, not as some mythologized, idealized, romanticized version, but how tribes actually live. They're extremely territorial. They're violent. They've got weapons, bows and arrows and clubs and things like that, and they will fight ruthlessly with neighboring tribes, and they will hold grudges against neighboring tribes for generations and hundreds of years. They will kidnap each other's children and wives. They will seek revenge and retribution because there will be blood feuds between these different tribes. Maybe 20 years ago, you kidnapped my daughter. So then, I've been biding my time, and then my ancestors will come and they will kill your grandmother as retribution for you kidnapping my daughter, and so forth. This is very normal stuff. This is business as usual for tribes. So you can see it's a ruthless existence because there is no higher moderating power. There's nobody you can go to say like, oh, well, but that tribe, they kidnapped my daughter, and that's wrong. So we should, stop them from doing that in the future because I have other daughters. I don't want them to get hurt too. See, normally in an advanced society, you would go to police or you would go to some court, and they would adjudicate these things for you, and they would step in on your behalf, and they would stop any sort of shenanigans from happening. They would stop people from stealing your property and invading you and whatever else. But for that to happen, that requires restriction, regulation, requires monopoly of force. Because here, the state, in this case, has a military, they have a police, they have a court system, all of this stuff. This is a monopoly of force. So what we've done in advanced societies is we've actually relinquished certain freedoms that we used to have so that we can get a more peaceful, ordered, cohesive society. It's sort of like we come together and we agree, like let's say in warfare, it's interesting that you might think, well, warfare is the perfect example of unregulated activity. It's ruthless, people just slaughtering and killing each other indiscriminately. But in advanced society, we actually have rules for warfare that we've agreed to. There are certain like Geneva Convention protocols and rules that treaties that have been signed against using nuclear weapons, against using chemical weapons, biological weapons, mustard gas, and even certain kind of bullets are banned from use on the battlefield. Because there are certain bullets these days that are just like especially inflict a lot of suffering. I don't know what they're called, hollow points or whatever. I'm not a bullet expert, but there are certain munitions, certain kinds of explosives, certain kinds of like napalm and stuff that is just horrific beyond simply, you know, getting the normal sort of evils of the battlefield. These are like an additional layer. So my point is that we have come together, and because we've had centuries of ruthless war where people were getting napalmed and tortured and, you know, getting shot with crazy ammunition that, you know, maimed them and just destroyed everything, and, you know, gas and biological weapons, all this sort of stuff, and even nuclear weapons. We've had all this. We've seen the horrors of it, and collectively we've come together as enemies, as opposite sides. We've come together and we said, okay, I know I hate you, and I know you hate me, but at least together, even though we hate each other, and even though we know we're going to go to war sometime in the future, nevertheless, can you and I agree that we're not going to use nuclear weapons? Okay? Can we agree that we're not going to use napalm against each other? Okay. Can we agree that we're not going to torture each other's, you know, captive prison? Okay. So at least we can agree on that. And that will at least mitigate some of the horror of survival. But this requires agreement. And then furthermore, how do you enforce the agreement if one side decides to cheat? What happens if we agree to this, but then secretly I'm torturing your prisoners when I capture them? Well, you see, the only solution to that is for you to start torturing my prisoners, because that lets me get a taste for how bad it is. And then we can come back to the table, because, you know, if I'm torturing yours and you're torturing mine, we can come back to the table maybe in 10 years and we can agree, okay, we've both tortured enough of each other's prisoners. Can we agree to stop? But then you tell me, well, how can we agree if we agreed last time 10 years ago, but you cheated? And what am I going to say? I'm going to say, well, yeah, I did. I cheated. Or I'm going to deny it. See? But at some point, we have to get to a point where we can come together and coordinate and not cheat on each other. That's difficult to do. This is the problem of government in a nutshell. But you see what's happening here. You think that freedom is this absolute good, but notice what's happening. If we come together and we sit down at a negotiating table and we agree to restrict nuclear weapons, napalm, and mustard gas, and whatever else, bad bullets and so forth, we are restricting freedom. That's not freedom. That's regulation. That's restriction. That's limitation. And in this situation, it's a good. It's a net positive. It allows for peace. It reduces suffering. So this example alone completely throws a wrench in the works of libertarian philosophy. This is just one example. Now, you need to extrapolate this example out into all of its different forms. It doesn't just happen with arms deals at the negotiating table between nations. This happens all across society, all across community. We create strategic restrictions and limitations and regulations, otherwise known as laws, so that we can adhere to those laws, and these laws are designed not to take away our freedom. Nobody sits down to design a law and says, well, I have too much freedom on my hands. Let me create a law that will take it away from me. No, nobody says that. What happens is that we start from a position where we have so much freedom that all sorts of chaos and devilry runs rampant. We feel it so much. It hurts us so deeply when it touches our own family, our own children, our own health, our own lives, our own communities, our own nations get destroyed and savaged, and genocide happens. We experience all this slavery. We experience all that, and we say, okay, enough. I'm fucking sick of it. I am willing to surrender some of this freedom for a couple of laws that will just tell people, like, don't enslave others, don't rape others, don't use mustard gas, etc.